This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. A big win for Newcastle over Chelsea in the race for fifth place. One of those fast starts and an early goal. It's as if Chelsea had no idea this is how Eddie Howe's team play. In quite an elbowy weekend, Nicholas Jackson saw red. Forest dropped points at home to Leicester. Fortunately, they're sort of not anymore owner, but still their owner, Evangelos Marinakis, seemed pretty relaxed about things. Man City couldn't win at Southampton, who are officially not the worst Premier League team of all time now. A good win for Villa at Bournemouth. Lovely finish from Ollie Watkins in quite an elbowy weekend. Tyrone Mings didn't get sent off. In the not a title decider at Anfield, taboo or not taboo, that is the question. Were we wrong to make a difference between online and match-going fans? In the game of which Europa League finalist is worse, well, it's almost impossible to tell. Also today, Chelsea women are the new invincibles, Leighton Orient are all offside. Your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
Hello, Lucy Ward.
Hey, Max.
And welcome, Sam Dalling.
Hello, Max.
Let's start then with the race for the Champions League spots in that game between two sides that are in for it. Newcastle beat Chelsea 2-0. You were at this one, Sam. I mean, you have seen Newcastle start like this before, so I imagine it's sort of what you're used to.
Yeah, I have. It was a fast start, but then a very long afternoon. Look, it was job done. Tonali gets that goal really early. I mean, that's classic Newcastle, and Chelsea just didn't feel like they had a plan. Like, it was a bit naive from them. And I was thinking during the game, actually, what you do forget is that Maresca is a relatively young coach and inexperienced. Like, it's his first season in the Premier League, and he came up against Eddie Howe, but it was like they hadn't watched any sort of video footage. They really didn't know what to do against Newcastle, and Newcastle were actually not at their best. They were a bit wasteful. They had this time where Isaac, Barnes, Murphy all seemed to be on hot streaks, and actually everyone's blowing a little bit cold at the moment. Very dominant first half. I've talked before on the pod about this sous vide football that Eddie Howe plays, just sucking the space out of Chelsea and just standing there and allowing their centre-backs to have the ball, and they just didn't know what to do. And weirdly, they were much better once they got a man sent off. But it was an odd day because 12 o'clock on a Sunday is no time to start a game of football. I think had they come up on the morning, the earliest Chelsea fans could have got into Newcastle Station is about 17 minutes before the game. Like, it just felt wrong, and the goal... The worry is at those times that the atmosphere is lacking, and the goal changed that. Everyone was bang up for it in inverted commas, and it was basically a high noon shootout, wasn't it, as everyone was calling it. But it was a nervous afternoon. After that first goal, it wasn't until almost injury time that Newcastle got the second, and it was one of the longest watches certainly of this season. It was up there with the last half hour of the cup final.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I suppose good for the Sky graphics people that they could say high noon, because they don't get many. They get some 12:30s, but you can't really high noon at 12:30, can you? And I suppose, Barry, the way Chelsea conceded that goal in the second minute, it's almost like Anthony Gordon's on the ground, which is quite a familiar place for him. but then Chelsea just were waiting, I guess, for a VAR check for the ref to say it's all right, that's not a penalty, it wasn't a penalty, and they kind of stopped.
When they scored, I thought, this is going to be ruled out for offside, because Anthony Gordon had been on the ground. He was trotting back into an onside position after not getting the penalty I think he was kind of expecting. But he certainly wasn't interfering with play. Moise Caicedo was out of position. Romeo Lavia was robbed of possession by Sandro Tonali. The ball was played out wide, and then Tonali got the wrong side the right side for him of Chalobah and slotted home. It was indicative of Newcastle's usual start, the ferocious press that Chelsea didn't seem prepared for at all. And then when Nicholas Jackson got sent off, I thought, right, well, that's it, game over. But Chelsea did actually improve with 10 men. They never really looked like winning, but they had chances. They had chances to equalise. Didn't take them, and then Bruno's somewhat lucky second goal killed the game off. But I can see why Sam thought it was an uncomfortably long afternoon. Newcastle never looked entirely comfortable until they got that late second goal.
Lucy, how do we feel about the red card? Is he slightly unlucky because Botman sort of does duck into his head, and he may have been just trying to elbow him in the sternum, which is sort of more yellow than red.
Yeah, I think the fact that he looked first, as soon as they watch and you've had a look first to see, then it just looks like that is exactly what he intended to do. And to be honest, he didn't really need to do it either. But Chelsea at the moment are actually playing that quite well. And when they scored the other goal, I thought, and that they coped quite well after they reacted. They didn't. Quite a lot of teams will crumble after conceding one really early goal at Newcastle and then concede another one, but they didn't. I quite like Lavia. Is a very good player. I liked him at Southampton, and he's got the system right, I think, generally at Maresca, when he has Caicedo coming inside, going next to Lavia. He's quite solid there with Fernandes in front. So I think he's quite clever, Maresca, in terms of some of the tweaks that he does. I've covered a lot of the Conference League games against the Dog and Duck FC from Latvia, and he's tweaks it in the second half quite a lot, and it's quite clever. It's quite interesting to see. There's not much interesting going on in those games, but his tactical tweaks I find quite interesting. So he is a young coach. He is learning. I'm not sure he'll be at Chelsea next season just because Chelsea. But I think that he's a very clever coach, and I think he can see things. And this is the thing for coaches. If they stood on the sideline and they recognise something's going wrong and can tweak it, then I think he's got that, which is obviously a really good thing to have.
Did enjoy on Match of the Day too, Sam, Russell Martin suggesting that Chelsea could just go a bit more direct. I was like, well hang on.
Oh, don't get me on
hang on.
Jesus.
He's very eloquent on the game. I liked him as a pundit, but I wonder if that. God, I go to Lucy. What's wrong with Russell Martin? Lucy?
Just Southampton and how, I don't know. It was like a Vincent Kompany. I've talked about this before and ranted about it. Playing like he plays and not giving any responsibility to the players is just ridiculous. And then I just keep seeing being touted for all these jobs, and I just think, what? Did you not watch what he did with Southampton? Did you not watch, how he didn't adapt? But so yeah,
that's all right. I was coming to you, Sam, but no, that's okay.
Sorry.
The desperation, the exhaling.
I'm sure he is eloquent. I'm sure he is very eloquent, and I'm sure that he sort of reads out of his coaching books. I'm sure he is very eloquent looking at it. But it's the fact of the matter is when it comes to it, he can't adapt and he can't change, and Southampton are now down because of him. Sorry.
It's okay. Newcastle will finish second if they win all their last two games, which is quite extraordinary because at the start of the season they were sort of playing badly but winning. Then they played well and lost, but they were 12th or something. There were a few murmurs about Eddie Howe.
Yeah, it was 20th of December. I had to look, 11 points behind Chelsea, down in 12th, and just not playing very well and without any excuse because there was no Europe. And when Newcastle fans looked at the fixture list at the start of the season, front end, I thought, this is a chance to get ahead front end of the year. As it has happened, you're looking at fixtures before the season starts and you look at Tottenham and Manchester United and you're thinking those are difficult games, whereas actually that's not necessarily been the case. But yeah, I mean, to go to the Emirates on the penultimate day of the season thinking if Newcastle can beat Arsenal, they will go second in the Premier League, you just couldn't have dreamt it before Christmas. And he's changed it. Tonali, who scored in this game, he's been massive since he came in and found a starting role. But just the way he's tweaked formations a little bit, I don't think Maresca expected him to do what he did on Sunday, which was go to a back three. And look, Trippier missed out through injury. I have a suspicion that he was saving Sven Botman, who's I think started 5 or 6 games this season, Sven Botman, of which it's been the 2 cup semi-finals against Arsenal and that Chelsea game, because as good as Burn and Schär are against pace, which is what Chelsea had, they were a little bit lacking. So I don't think Maresca expected that Dan Burn would be the man, basically man-marking Cole Palmer. As deep as Cole Palmer went, Burn was just following him around. Botman was sitting there with Jackson. And the Jackson red card comes from frustration. He throws the elbow, and before I don't know if they saw it, you could see it on TV, but before they've gone over to VAR, Jackson's screaming at the centre-backs and just saying, play it lower to me, please. I need it in on my feet or in behind. So they got really frustrated with that, Chelsea. But as Lucy said, I think if Reece James starts that game at right back and Caicedo plays in midfield, it could potentially be a different outcome. So he tweaked it, but he got it wrong in the first instance, Maresca.
I like the idea of being man-marked by Dan Burn. Or wherever you go. It's like the BFG, just sort of wandering around. Like, what are you doing? Let's go to the City ground. Forest 2, Leicester 2. Credit to Leicester for puncturing their rivals' Champions League ambitions. We should, Barry, start with Marinakis and Nuno after the game. I must say, I heard a lot about it before I saw it. And I didn't think it was as bad as I heard people suggesting it was. Nuno dealt with it pretty well afterwards, said, look, football's about emotions. We cannot make a big deal out of it. Gary Neville said, scandalous from that Forest owner. Nuno should go and negotiate his exit tonight with him. The Forest fans, players and manager do not deserve that. And he's not the chairman anymore, sort of, is he? But clearly you don't want the chairman yelling at the manager after the game.
Well, he is the owner of the club. It's just his share of it has been put in a, whatever you call it, some sort of blind trust, and he's not supposed to have any input in proceedings. So maybe whoever's in charge of the blind trust should have gone out and had words with Nuno on his behalf. But he is a big character who likes to put himself front and centre. There are a lot of, quite a few unpleasant owners in the Premier League. I would say he's right up there amongst them. And in the interests of avoiding legal action, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Quite clearly was unhappy about something or other. I don't know if it was the Tayo Awani injury. There was some sort of mix-up or breakdown in communication there. But that was very late in the game. I don't know if he was just annoyed because Forest didn't win and let Leicester take a point off them. But anyway, he has a habit of putting himself front and centre, and personally, I don't think he should.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, isn't it? Forest getting into Europe, Lucy, should not be underestimated, right? This confirmed that they're definitely going to get into Europe. It is, I suppose, it's how you do it in the season, right? If you finish really strongly and people are like, wow, Forest march to Europe, as opposed to they've been in the Champions League spots for so long, the supercomputer has them sort of like the least chance of the teams going for it now. But that shouldn't take away from, what they've achieved.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have told the fans in August that a point yesterday, and I think it's the second to last home game, would guarantee them being in Europe, they'd have been like, no, absolutely no chance. And then as soon as they start overachieving, they don't deserve Nuno. I'll tell you, he does not deserve Nuno as a manager, because afterwards Nuno completely played it down. He started to sort of say about, the staff, the miscommunication about an injury, a typical sort of narcissist way of sort of managing a manager. And I know he's quite difficult to handle. I mean, you should be happy really that Nuno kept them up. That's it. That's what they thought at the start of the season. Forest, let's stay up. Let's make sure we build on. And then look where they are. And to be honest, if they get the Conference League or Europa League, it'd probably be a nice little stepping stone. I think that jump to Champions League is quite difficult. Yes, they'll get the money, but it's making the right squad decisions. That the Conference League or the Europa League might be a better stepping stone.
Possibly, although quite hard to get to the Europa League final. You certainly have to have a good Premier League season if you want to do that. We should talk about Morgan Gibbs-White a bit, Sam. Manchester City apparently sniffing around him. Scored, but that cross for Chris Wood is so brilliant for that goal, isn't it?
Oh, it's perfect, isn't it? He sees the run. Wood's maybe 10 yards shy of the defender, and he just puts it exactly where he wants it. It's a good header, but Gibbs-White, I do hope he stays at Nottingham Forest. I know he's been not out of form recently, but that was his first goal, wasn't it? He'd scored for a fair old while. So I hope he's sort of their talismanic figure. And there's the whole narrative with when he was at Wolves with Nuno, they sort of fell out, and maybe his behaviour's off the pitch. He wasn't as professional as he could have been, and he's turned into this talismanic figure. Now, maybe Champions League football, while Forest would potentially struggle with the demands of it, maybe that dictates whether Gibbs-White stays there or not. I just found it sad. I saw someone on, I don't know, one of these social media things had done simulated 10,000 run the end of the season basically 10,000 times simulated. It was percentage chances of getting in the Champions League, and Nottingham Forest are now at 14%. On the owner thing, it's a separate bugbear of mine, right? I'm not going to name the official because it's not their fault, because that's what they're told to do. But when there's a blatant offside, please just stick the flag up. I've seen it before, players getting injured, because that's how Awayeni ends up colliding with the post. The original player's offside. I saw Edison get injured last year. And when it's so blatantly obvious, just go back to backing yourselves and making that first decision. It's not the assistant referee's fault, but stick your flag up, Liner.
So the other thing on that is the Leicester fans were singing "Champions of England." You'll never sing that to Forest fans, and that is football.
Yeah.
That is just football in this century.
Yeah. Archie Rintar, our mate, said, if City get done for their charges and get relegated, couldn't that actually mean that what Ipswich and Leicester are doing in the final weeks of the season has genuine consequences? I hadn't actually thought of that. Obviously, we're expecting the result of that verdict about 2 months ago, so we'll probably get it in about 5 years.
I raised this issue on the pod some months ago, Max.
No,
you
I wasn't.
clearly weren't listening.
Okay, what did you come to a conclusion that I also wasn't listening to?
No, I just said that finishing third from bottom could be a massive deal if Manchester City get relegated, because you might stay up.
Yeah, so at the moment they're level on points. Ipswich's goal difference is 5 goals better than Leicester's. So yeah, they should keep at it. Southampton, meanwhile, second on Match of the Day with a goalless draw. They tweeted, sorry if we got your hopes up, and then tagged Derby County. Lloyd said, what side of the debate are you on? Saints are a disgrace for celebrating the point against City, or it's fine to do so? Will you be having a special pod covering the open-top bus parade Saints will be having for securing 12 points? As a Saints fan, I was ecstatic. Mike says, was I the only one left disappointed we didn't get a full-time pitch invasion at St Mary's? Ruben Diaz was not impressed. I don't even feel like they want to play the game or win the game. They're just sitting around. Great sentence, isn't it? We tried every way. We had chances, but we didn't score. It is what it is. Robbie Savage was not happy with how Saints celebrated on his radio show. Completely unconnected. He was the Derby captain during the 11-point season. What do we think, Lucy?
Well, my friend, one of my good friends, Maud, is a Saints fan, and she was absolutely ecstatic that they got the 0-0 draw, because she got there and she was messaging saying, this is a nightmare, this could be an absolute nightmare, and then everybody was buzzing. And why not? Because, and Ruben Diaz saying that, but what does he expect them to do? They had 11 points, did they? Now they've got 12 points. That is the entitlement of teams that are quite good compared to teams that are not. But I think they were disciplined, weren't they, and resilient Saints, and I suppose that's the performance that the fans will remember, but I don't blame them at all. Making sure they don't concede, because earlier on in the season that would have been about 13-0.
I think it was a very Wenger-esque reaction from Diaz.
Yeah.
Arsene never liked it when other poorer quality sides had the audacity to tackle his players or not just usher them through and allow them to score. I think it's okay to think that, but don't say it in your post-match interview, because it just stinks of sour grapes, doesn't it? As for Southampton's tweet, I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But there are certain people, fans, pundits, who are very po-faced and take these things very, very seriously indeed. And there should be no place for humour in the game.
Haven't Southampton put together a clip of basically Manchester City playing the ball out of play and missing all their chances, and it says something like, aren't there two? I think 2 teams weren't trying to play football.
Really good.
Yeah,
that's
which
brilliant.
I love. And I think I've never been an F1 fan, but I've just got into it through the Drive to Survive series. And the best part about it is the press conferences, where they're not individual, they stick everyone in together. So people like Toto Wolff and Christian Horner are in, and it's really awkward. And that's exactly the kind of scenario where you want Ruben Diaz in alongside Simon Rusk, and then both fielding questions at the same time. I think that's how we liven up press conferences.
What would have been absolutely tremendous is if Cameron Archer had squared the ball for Ross Stewart at that late Southampton attack and he'd scored. Southampton had taken all 3 points. Now, that would have been absolutely tremendous. I don't know if anyone else noticed this as well, but Simon Rusk, Southampton's interim manager, the camera cut to him at one stage in his training top, had Draper tools on the front. I was like, have we gone back to 1980?
That's great. He'll just find any old jumper. That'll do, won't it? Finally in the race for the top 5, Aston Villa, key win for them. And, looking at the fixtures, Bournemouth away certainly seemed less winnable than Leicester at home or Southampton away. So really good for them. Obviously, one or both of Newcastle or Chelsea would drop points. And the winner, Sam, is a brilliant finish from Ollie Watkins, isn't it? Becomes their record Premier League scorer outright. He's had a sort of hit and miss season, but that's a great goal.
Yeah, it's such a deft little touch, isn't it? It's a tiny little flick. Initially, when I first saw it live, because as a Newcastle fan, I was quite interested in this game. The result didn't go the way I wanted it. But when I first saw it live and they were raving about it, I thought, is it really that? It wasn't the cross, he's just managed to get a flick on it. But actually, it's very deliberate where he's putting it. And it's in a strange position, Watkins. Like, he obviously wasn't happy about not playing those Champions League games, and I talked about it in previous pods. They played this risky game in January, gambling on getting into the Champions League by bringing in someone like Rashford and Asensio, players who probably aren't going to be there next year, and risking the mirth of Ollie Watkins. I've watched him. He can be devastating. There's also an argument to say that sometimes he's not quite clinical enough to be a top level striker, but his record in the last couple of years, both goals and assists, is wonderful. And they really need to keep him sweet, Ollie Watkins. They needed that win. I thought Onana was really good in midfield because Tielemans has been one of Villa's best players, actually. What a brilliant signing he's been on a free. But it was massive for Aston Villa that they absolutely needed it. Emery's interview, did you see it before the game? He wasn't even asked a question, and he just sort of started saying Europe really loudly at the interview. It's like, okay, we get it, Unai. But yeah, great result. Ollie Watkins, brilliant.
Jacob Ramsey was sent off for two sort of pretty soft moments in the game, wasn't he? Tyrone Mings wasn't. Alex Scott suffered a fractured jaw from that moment, Barry, where Mings' elbow goes into his face. I mean, that's a very passive way of describing someone elbowing someone in the face, I guess. But PJMOL said a natural action and there wasn't much swing in it. Pundits were divided. What do you think?
He didn't swing the elbow, but I think he knew what he was doing, and I think he was very lucky not to get sent off.
I think it's worse than that, though. I think it's I thought it was horrible, actually. I thought it was worse, as bad or if not worse than the Jackson one. Surprise, the centre-half on Match of the Day said, oh no, it's absolutely fine. It was like, oh, it's Alex Scott's fault for being that short. Like, he looks at him, you can put your arm up, and I know we're not on camera here, but you can put your arm up. But what he didn't do, he didn't just put his arm up, he put the elbow in a shape where he knew that if someone made contact with that elbow, it was going to really hurt, and that's what he's done. So I think he's very lucky, and not enough has been made of it.
All right. Well, now something has been made of it, so maybe he'll get his punishment. That'll do for part one. Part two, we'll begin with the Liverpool Arsenal game. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Liverpool 2, Arsenal 2. Not a bad game. I mean, the big story, Lucy, is the boos for Trent. Jack says, are Liverpool fans managing to find a way of not enjoying winning the title? Matt says, how do Liverpool fans define walking alone? D6 Base says, can we boo Barry? I mean, we don't know if he's off, do we, in the summer to a glittering new opportunity in foreign lands. But there's been no transfer fee as he's seen down his contract. Look, it was a mixed reaction, Lucy, when he came on. But there were a lot of boos, more than I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't get my head around it. I mean, there's a kid who joined at whatever age, worked his way up through the age groups, which is ridiculously difficult to do. To get from sort of 8 years old to then 14 to then get a 2-year deal to 16 to then get a scholarship and then get a pro and then do well. Seen all his mates fall by the wayside, won it all, and then decides to move on at the end of his contract. I mean, I sort of, people are entitled to boo. It's just, I don't know. I think Andy Robertson's interview at the end just show, if you could watch that, it's like these are like friends, teammates, and he's basically said he made me a better player, and that's what it's all about. It's about winning things together. It's about relationships, and to be honest, and I know it's probably not a popular thing to say, but sod what they think, the fans think, because they've done it all together. And he is, Andy Robertson was loyal about his mate, because he's, as far if the players don't think that he's done anything wrong, then he hasn't done anything wrong. Alexander-Arnold, in my opinion, and that is what it's all about.
It's interesting. Like, of course, fans can be entitled to boo who they want, but then people are allowed to have their view on the fans, are entitled to have their view that the people booing just don't really get it.
Well, Jamie Carragher would have us believe that we're not entitled to have our opinion on what Liverpool fans think. Although he was quick to give his opinion on the Liverpool fans who booed. So Jamie Carragher he's got a very fluid set of rules on who is allowed to have an opinion on what Liverpool fans think.
Clearly, what happens with this is there's a big boo, and then there's other people cheering, and like obviously the boo comes first, and is sort of more noticeable than the other people. So like in the same way that you can't categorize all online fans, you can't categorize all match-going fans, but we made a real point to sort of to really separate the two when we were talking about the abuse that Trent Alexander-Arnold was getting on social media and saying, look, that isn't what is happening at Anfield. And yet when he came on, I mean, Johnny Lou made a point that, like, if this is a title decider, that's not how the Liverpool fans are reacting, right? There's a sort of, the circumstance dictated that, this game didn't really mean anything to the Liverpool fans. This is what Johnny said. He said, look, the booing of Alexander-Arnold was unbelievably petty, unashamedly small-minded, deeply ungrateful, and all these things are intended as compliments. Football fandom should be all these things. It should be irrational. It should be intensely subjective and wildly disproportionate. Stoke fans still boo Aaron Ramsey for breaking his leg against them 15 years ago. Sunderland and Coventry still hate each other because Jimmy Hill put a score on a scoreboard in 1977. There are no rules to this thing, and can you imagine if there were? Does he have a point there, Sam?
Yeah, I read that. It's eloquently put. It's a lovely piece of writing. I don't agree at all because this is their own player. Like, I've never seen anything like that. I was trying to think if I've been in a similar situation, and I've booed plenty of ex-Newcastle players, but never while they're still playing for the club. And this is the fact there's pressure off it. Mm-hmm. It's a celebration. It's like at the birth of your firstborn child, you're just obsessing about the fact there's no cheese and onion crisps left in the vending machine. Like, it's just completely like, why? Why do you care?
I thought you were going to say you booed your rival of your firstborn child.
It's just completely misplaced, and it's not right. The fault here, Liverpool should. I don't know why I got really animated about that actually, but the fault here is that whoever was in charge of Liverpool, and I know they should not have had 3 of their biggest players out of contract at the same time. Like, that complete circus. Like, that is where the fault lies. And it's like, what do we have to do now? Do we put an asterisk next to "You Never Walk Alone" and say, well, unless you do something that we don't quite agree with? And Slot is being very diplomatic and saying, oh, everyone has their opinion. I'm not going to tell people how to think. But I think in his actions, he's showing what he thinks about it, because doesn't have to bring Alexander-Arnold on there. The easy thing to do would just be to leave him out and say, okay, Trent, you go. We don't want to take away from the celebrations, but he's part of that squad. And Lucy makes the point, like, what are the other players thinking? Because that is they're his mates. You think, right, so this lot can turn on us really, really quickly. So maybe it's not quite this like lovely, we're all part of it forever thing, and that would be worrying.
There was another interesting part in Johnny's piece, saying that there's a common view among rival fans that Liverpool is an irredeemably mawkish place, a fan base mired in nostalgia and big feelings. But is there anything colder, anything more ruthless and businesslike than booing one of your greatest homegrown players the moment he ceases to be useful? I always think that's interesting, that thing about Liverpool fans where other clubs are so desperate to say they're not as special as they are. They're clearly a special club, but Liverpool fans obviously think they're the most special thing that's ever existed, and that's also not the case. It's sort of somewhere in the middle. But I thought that was an interesting point that he made.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think Liverpool is not so much a football club as a cult. And I suppose anyone who leaves a cult attracts opprobrium from the other members of the cult. You know, if it's the Scientologists, anyone who tries to escape the Scientologists, that never ends.
It's going to be Louis Theroux's going to be talking to Trent Alexander-Arnold and trying to get into the inner sanctum, and just really long silences with Arne Slot.
I'd be interested to know, and we won't know because we're not mates of his, what Trent Alexander-Arnold made of it. Like, is he just amused? Does he care? Possibly not.
I think there is a real... I think, like, people occasionally talk about, those old times when players and fans would get the bus together to football matches in the 50s or whatever, and they'd go and play, you'd watch them, and then you'd have a beer afterwards. And it is just so different. There is just so... I was caught for so many reasons. But I remember talking to a couple of players, and I won't name the club, but it was a one-club town, and they were like, look, we just can't ever go out in this city, whether it's good or bad. It's just, there's just no, and it wasn't Newcastle, but like there's just no point. I remember chatting to them after a soccer game, and they were just saying you just can't do it, and I guess social media totally exacerbates that whole situation. So I imagine they just like, just don't worry about it. It's a different they're sort of two separate worlds, I imagine. But I don't know. He might be really pissed off. Like, he's given a lot to that football club, hasn't he? Look, we should say, Lucy, like, Arsenal did really well to come back into this game because they weren't good in the first half and they really turned it on. And that point actually might be quite important in just confirming Champions League football.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously with the City drawing as well, it makes a difference. But I noticed when they moved Martinelli into a more central position and he looked quite comfortable. And I know that's happened before, I think, for Arsenal, but you can't help but think, and I know it's been said so many times, but absolutely disastrous to Arsenal's season how they didn't get a natural goal-scoring finisher. And there was so many points during that PSG second leg where you thought if they'd have just had somebody with that sort of instinct in that sort of place, then it would have been completely different. And I still can't work out, and I'm maybe just wasting my thought, but whether Arteta was happy about it. Can't think for a minute that he is happy about it or was happy about it, but he never says anything, and I suppose that might be a good thing, but I don't know. They missed Gabriel, that's for a start, so they might not have even got through anyway if they'd have had a striker. But how on earth did they not get a striker? Honestly, I know I'm boring, but I just can't get my head around it.
No, it's the first time I've heard it this season, Lucy. So no, it's a point that somebody should tell the hierarchy.
But why? So if all the fans knew it was gonna, all the Arsenal fans could see this coming in sort of October, November. So how on earth did the hierarchy at Arsenal not know? Anyway,
I don't know. Arteta said straight out of the high performance playbook, "I hate reaction. I like action." I might get that tattooed on one of my pecs. Pecs is an overstatement, I would suggest. Liverpool could have won it late on with that Andy Robertson goal that was disallowed for a foul by Konate, I think. And I wondered if Alisson could have done a bit better with the Odegaard strike, or maybe I'm being slightly harsh. Anyway, let's crack on. The two Europa League finalists and the race for 17th. I mean, obviously these games don't really matter for Manchester United and Spurs. I mean, they don't really matter for West Ham and Crystal Palace either. I mean, Crystal Palace had the cup final. Someone texted my radio show calling it El Carefullico, which I thought was really quite funny for those two sides. Let's start with Man United. And we should say, Barry, like, Graham Potter needed this, even if it makes no real difference to West Ham's season. They've been 8 without a win, and they were good in this game.
They were good, and they've done a Premier League double over Man United. Certainly not alone in that regard. But a win at Old Trafford is always good for any team. And, I mean, they were so much better than Manchester United in this game. They could have won by a lot more, I think. I think Areola only had to make 1, maybe 2 saves, decent of note. The best of them from Hoyland. But I'm sort of mystified is a bit of a stretch because it is West Ham, but when you look at some of the players they have, I don't think they should be anywhere near the bottom of the table.
Who's this, West Ham or Man United? West Ham.
West Ham.
Okay. You think Man United are in the right place?
Well, I mean, at the start of the season when we were doing our previews, I said Manchester United would finish 12th, and that prompted sharp intakes of breath from everyone else who was on the panel. And I was way wrong on that one, but not for the reasons people were expecting.
I think this year, is it? They've only beaten the 3 relegated sides. That is it. That's astonishing, isn't it? But I mean, there is, like Ange said this afterwards, sort of link these two games together, that, you know, had they not had this run in Europe, and maybe it's not a good excuse, then they would have got more results in the Premier League. I think that's probably true for both.
It's a terrible excuse.
Yeah, but
it's probably true, though.
It's probably true, but it's like, it's not necessarily good enough. I mean, you're right. Hoyland missed a chance you'd expect him to miss, and then missed a chance you'd expect him to score. Amorim said, "I'm responsible. If we cannot change really fast, we should give our jobs to a different person," and sort of intimated that the squad aren't that bothered about losing. Meanwhile, Sam, Crystal Palace did play their first team, which I thought was interesting a week ahead of the FA Cup final. Spurs made 8 changes. Man United did make 6 changes. That obviously affects things. But Palace destroyed Tottenham in this game. Destroyed them.
So much fun to watch. I'm glad he played his full side. I think it was right. And he said, "Look, you need rhythm, right? You want momentum when you're Crystal Palace going into a cup final. You go, oh, Spurs away. We could go and turn them over." And they did. And they could have scored more. I suspect Ange Postecoglou was watching that Daniel Munoz go down the right wing and think, that is my kind of fullback. Like, he is half the time the most advanced player on the pitch. He was brilliant. I think he scored at Spurs last year. I think he scored an absolute belter. But I mean, they're basically 2 tap-ins he's got. The team goals that he's just been able to work in. And Sarr had one ruled out. And he's an interesting one, Sarr, because it was big boots to fill with Elise going. And Sarr's come in quite quietly. And he was at Watford a couple of years ago, and there were talk of Liverpool being in for him for 40, 50 million quid. But then there was stuff around his attitude, and he wasn't quite advanced enough to be a Premier League regular, to be a top level player. And I think he did do a year in the Championship and then went away to France and come back, and he's just quietly become part of that Crystal Palace first team, and part of that sort of flying front three. And I think they've got a really good chance against Manchester City, and I really do hope that they can get into Europe that way, because if you actually, they had a really bad start to the season, didn't they? And if you chop away the first 8-10 games, which I know you can't do because that's not how a season works, but they'd be up there. We'd be talking about them in the same sort of sentence as maybe even as high as Nottingham Forest, maybe a bit better than the likes of Bournemouth and Brighton. Good for them.
Yeah, good for them. Look, you were in Bodo, Lucy. It must have been fascinating. It must have been great to be up there. But when you look at how well Spurs played in Frankfurt and in Bodo, and how well they defended, and then you watch this team, I mean, they can't defend at all. Like, it's sort of mad.
Yeah. I mean, they are, I think it's safe to say that they are not the same team without that back four in it. They are a completely different team, like sort of 12 or 13 places.
Which is fair, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Is that fair? Like, yeah.
It's very difficult, but because of the way that he likes to play in the Premier League, the replacements can't play like he wants to play, so it becomes very sort of disjointed. But having been out there, and I haven't really covered, I mean, I've seen Tottenham this year, but I haven't really covered them in much detail. But I was really impressed with them. Obviously, I looked at the Frankfurt game, and then I did the game midweek. Really impressed with how they played and their intelligence, and obviously the difference between the two performances in the Premier League. But I think he basically, when they interviewed Postecoglou afterwards, journalists were asking the question about, they thought that the replacements didn't think they'd have any chance of playing in the final, so why bother even trying? And he was basically like saying, have you not seen what's happened to us the last couple of seasons, that the worst possible thing could happen at the worst possible time in terms of injuries? So then they all need to be prepared, which I completely agree with. And Postecoglou makes me, I love Postecoglou. I love Glasner. I think I was singing Glasner's praises right from the start, from when he came from Frankfurt, even when it was going wrong at Crystal Palace, because he's very good. But I love how Ange does not indulge the journalists. So that's why there is a negative thing about Ange, and that's why it's developed. And then he's bitten against it, and then it's become what it's become. Most managers keep journalists on side because the journalists, as a natural human reaction, write nice things about them. That's the way that relationships work. And he just thinks, I am not indulging any of these. So they all, right from the start, you can see they were a little bit like chippy towards him. So then he was chippy back, and then it's escalated. But I love it. And all I want to happen is that Spurs win the Europa League, and he mic drops and sticks 2 fingers up and says, see you later, I'm off. That would just be, I'm not a Spurs fan, but I'd just love it if that happened, honestly, because then Postecoglou, everything that's been said about him, he can just go, see you, there you go, trophy won, see you later.
Could I humbly suggest that Tottenham are being massively overpraised for beating a side from Norway whose most expensive player cost £6 million?
Hey, they've battered everybody at home, Baz. That pitch is horrific. That pitch had like folds on the side of it. It was horrendous. And they have beaten Lazio there. They've beaten everybody there. Nobody gets away with not being scored against, and they usually get battered there. So that is the praise that I would give to Spurs. Yes, they're not very good, but they are at home usually.
Yeah, on indulging journalists, it is worth watching the Spurs social media interviewer, like the Spurs TV guy, and there are normally like 3 or 4 of them, but sometimes it's just the one old guy who's always like, he's like, cool, look at that, Ange. They've lost 6-0, but like, cool, you've got to look at the positives, haven't you? Like Mikey Moore coming or whatever. You can just see Ange's like, oh God, I can't do another. I've got to answer questions from this guy every single week. He seems like a lovely guy. He's trying to draw out the positives, in the sort of PR club thing. Very funny. Anyway, that'll do for part 2. Part 3 will begin with the race for 8th place. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So 8th should get you in the Conference League. Brentford are 8th now, 55 from 36. Brighton have 55 from 36. Bournemouth 53 from 36 and Fulham 51. And Brentford's goal difference significantly better than Brighton. So they're in the box seat after that 1-0 win at Ipswich. Fulham lost 3-1 at home to Everton. Brighton beat Wolves. And, of course, covered Bournemouth already. Thing about Brentford, Sam, that I think we haven't really talked about a lot is they've had to change how they play because Ivan Toney isn't there and how well this front three have performed. And I haven't got all the stats of, possession stats and all that, but I really sense that they are playing much more football than they were. And that that if Thomas Frank manages to get them to Europe in a year where they kind of changed how they play, that is an incredible achievement.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I haven't got the possession stats, but I was having a look at the kind of goals and assists. And they've got 3 forwards in double figures, right? Schada's got 11. Mm-hmm. Visser and Mbeumo have both got 18. And between them, they've got, 12 assists. Like to have, there's not many teams that have got 3 forwards, all 3 of their main forwards in that sort of prolific a run. And all of them have been there for quite a while, actually. Schada and Visser have both been there a couple of years now, and Mbeumo even before. So they're so forward-thinking that even when they lose Toney, who was kind of the main player they had, they didn't need to go out and sign replacements because they've already got them. And there's an acceptance as well. I think was it Norgard that has done an interview recently? He said, well, we're expecting to lose Brian at some point, but we're as bothered as we are. We're not too bothered because we're not really about any one individual. And actually, Frank deserves a lot of credit, and if they're finally starting to put together a run of home and away results, because you remember at the start of the season they couldn't buy a point away from home. They had 1 from their first 8 away games, and now in their last 10 they've had 7 wins, 2 draws, and the only loss they've had was to Newcastle, which was that Jacob Murphy weird goal/cross thing. Then at the start of the season they won 7 of their first 8 home games and then didn't win in 8. And now finally they put together a little run of home and away, a couple of wins home, a couple of wins away. And they're only 8 off the Champions League, which is, they're not going to get up there. Obviously they mathematically can't, but it's a wonderful job Thomas Frank is doing. And as much as I've told an anecdote about how I don't like him, I actually do quite like him, and he seems like quite a nice man.
I think the thing about Brentford is the way that they recruit is through obviously numbers, so they know that whoever they buy has the potential to succeed, whichever position. So what they do is they afford them time and patience. So even if they don't start right or they're not quite as strong, they know that they'll come good. So they just keep playing them, which is why the likes of Mbeumo, like Visser comes through and play well. Schada, who sort of started off all right and then went in a dip, and now he's come good just because he's got space to shine. And I think not all teams can afford that.
Yeah, I was about to say that. If it is, we just talked about Tottenham and United. You just don't have that luxury, I guess, to be bad for.
No, but that's the way that they are.
So it turns out you're bad for 36 games. Now, the big talk in the WhatsApp group, Barry, was about Danny Welbeck, who's scored his 10th Premier League goal of the season. First time he's reached double figures. And you made the good point. This is a big mistake of Danny's to do this.
Yeah, he didn't do himself any favours scoring that penalty, because until it was pointed out that this was the first time he'd ever scored 10 goals in a Premier League season, I'd presumed he was really prolific and was, habitually banging in 15 goals a season over the course of 15 years or whatever it is. It turns out he's been stealing a living, Max. Because before this season, he'd never got more than 7. So yeah, that boggled my mind, that stat, and I don't think I'm the only one.
No, I had him at a good 12 to 15 every year for Danny Welbeck.
I mean, I know he's had an awful lot of bad luck with injuries and all that, but that was a stat that really fried my brain.
Yeah, big loss for Fulham in the race for European places. 3-1 at home to Everton. It's the story of the last 3 or 4 games, said Marco Silva. Goals have come from set pieces. We have to be willing to fight, do our job well, and we didn't. It's about concentration and focus. We have to blame ourselves. because it didn't happen before, but it did in the last few weeks in a very exciting moment. Darren England was called to the VAR screen for a penalty review for one of those ridiculous handballs, and he stuck to his decision. Honestly, I could have danced down the street naked, just screaming, I love Darren, this is the change we need. He's done it. David Moyes said, I clapped him. I would have had a Mexican wave. I saw it on the iPad and I saw the boy was running, so I don't know where you'd expect his hands to be. Isn't it great we have someone who is willing to go to the screen and stick with his decision? Yeah, thank you, Darren. It was injury time and already 3-1 to Everton, so I guess it wasn't a pivotal moment in the season, but all the same. On Leeds, Barca Jim says, how is Lucy feeling about this season? Because she's hinted that she might be from Leeds. Paul says, what are Lucy's thoughts on whether Leeds should stick with Daniel Farke, which they are doing, and what changes, if any, does she think the team needs, players, tactics to do well in the Premier League?
Yeah, it's been buzzing round here for the last sort of few weeks. I think at one point they thought that it wasn't going to happen. And then Sheffield United let them off the hook, I think, by losing 3 games in a row. But people haven't quite got over the euphoria of getting promoted. So we've not got past that yet before. So the last couple of days on the dog walk, because this is where I meet all the Leeds fans.
Of course.
Is that they're asking us about Daniel Farke. And it's like, right, so what do you want to do? Do you want to start with him? And then if he doesn't do that well, are you going to change him? But then you're 10 games in. So this is the sort of conversations that they're having. So they are thinking about it. Leeds fans are thinking, but it also depends on who you bring in as well. And I think he probably deserves to have the start in the Premier League. However, there's been lots of whispers around, and they don't really come from nothing, that is not going to happen. And then the chairman came out and said that he's going to start the season. So that doesn't help. But a manager is only as good as his players. So unless they completely ensure that they don't do another Ipswich, Southampton and Leicester, then I think it's going to be difficult. I think that quite a lot of the Leeds fans are like, yeah, it's brilliant, but we've seen what's happened the last couple of seasons. So the mood is mixed, shall I say.
Would you rather someone came in and parked the bus? Because this idea that people are more interested in seeing how Scott Parker's Burnley do because they are defensively so solid, and they're interested to see what that happens in the Premier League. And you look at Brentford, we talk about them changing their style, but they've taken a long time to do that.
Yeah,
or would you like Leeds to go gung-ho and you never know?
It just it depends, because Leeds had the best budget in the Championship this season. They had the best team in the Championship. They had the best 4 wingers in the Championship. So that sort of skewed a little bit, and they should have probably run away with the title. In the end, they win the title, but it's completely different, and it's a real balance between. And obviously, there was a lot of loan players as well. Manor Solomon is a loan player, so I think they need to go up a couple of 2 or 3 levels of players, defensive wise, perhaps as well. The goalkeeper is still not sure about Meslier. It looks like they're going to sell him, but then you need a goalkeeper. So there's lots of stuff, and I'm not sure that sitting and becoming defensive is probably going to be the right way of doing it. I think Burnley just need a little bit of balance. They need to score more goals, but stay the same defensive. But for Leeds, it's a real, I don't know. I don't really know what the first couple of signings will tell me what way they're thinking of going.
Playoffs are in full swing. We discussed Sheffield United's 3-0 win at Bristol City, slightly harshly getting Paul Watson, a Bristol City fan, on about a minute after they got hammered to do a podcast about other football matches. Baz, you won 2-1 at Coventry, a smash and grab. That's what people described it as. How did you feel about it?
It was a great win for Sunderland. The second leg's tomorrow night at the Stadium of Light. I would say it's still very much in the balance. I still continue to flip-flop over. Obviously, you want to win the playoffs. If Sunderland were to go and win the playoffs, I would immediately be overwhelmed with dread at the prospect of what's to come. What players would they lose? Who would they be able to keep? I suppose Sunderland have punched massively above their weight this season. No one was expecting them to finish 4th. I'd say mid-table was about as best as anyone was expecting. So who's to say Regis Lebris couldn't defy expectations again next season if they were to go up? But I just think they'd get slaughtered every week. Ideally, you'd win promotion, and then it's like a student deferring a university place for a couple of years. Just
Brilliant.
Win promotion, and then say, yeah, would you mind if we just defer, let someone else go up instead, let Sheffield United or Bristol City go up instead, and we'll take our place in 2 years' time when we're better equipped to make a decent fist of staying up.
That's a very good idea. In League One, Charlton drew 0-0 at Wickham. Producer Joel said it was an absolutely terrible game. Wickham made it a slog, but we'll take a draw back to a sold-out Valley. Also, Adams Park is too far away from anything, he says. And Leyton Orient 2, Stockport 2, which included Leyton Orient's opener, where their centre-forward was about 5 miles offside. Dave Chandler called it the worst decision he'd ever seen.
It's quite interesting, Max, because I was reading Twitter. My God, how did they not get that? How did they not get that? And I thought, right, I'll watch it. And I didn't have my glasses on when I was looking at it on my phone. And I thought, didn't see him get the touch at first. And I'm thinking it wasn't quite as obvious. Yes, he was offside, but it wasn't as obvious as everybody sort of made out. Maybe it was because I didn't have my glasses on when I was looking at it.
Well, he is miles offside, but it's whether the attacker or the defender heads the ball. And it's actually not that easy to say. So, yes, I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's the worst decision of all time. Wimbledon won 1-0 at Notts County. Walsall, who I think we're all supporting because of how they're just fall from grace, won 2-0 at Chesterfield. So maybe they'll get to Wembley and then balls it up. Final weekend of the WSL. I mean, most of the important stuff had been decided, but Chelsea unbeaten, first side to finish a 22-game season unbeaten. It's an amazing achievement, Lucy. Is it good or is it bad? What do we think about this?
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, it's brilliant. Don't get me wrong. For Chelsea, Bonpastor, new manager, has sort of got herself in there, transitioned very easily. But I just look at how far away they were from Barcelona in the Champions League and think, well, if that's the best we've got and it doesn't even compete with Barcelona, then we've got a problem somewhere. And you know, I've talked about it on the pod before. That it just needs more investment in the other teams, because Chelsea winning and being unbeaten, it being the furthest gap of points in WSL history, I don't think is a good thing, to be honest.
Yeah. Listen to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly, please. Jake says, hi, Max, Barry and Co. Long-time listener, first time getting in touch. Firstly, let me caveat with this. I appreciate there's an unbelievable amount of football for you guys to get through. It's impossible to cover everything. On last Thursday's pod, Bradford City's dramatic final day promotion heroics got around 30 seconds of coverage. Cue faux outrage at a lower league football club not getting the coverage it feels it deserves. Max's man of the people moniker being put to the sword once more. But on reflection, I think it's worth pointing out the significance of that day to our football club and our city. I'm writing this on the 11th of May, 40 years ago to the day of the fateful Bradford Fire Stadium disaster. Last Saturday's crucial promotion game against Fleetwood was the final home game of the season, where we traditionally pay our respects to all those who lost their lives and were injured or affected by the disaster. Always a poignant day for the club, but last weekend was something truly special. The emotion in the stadium was palpable. A promotion push twinned with the 40th anniversary made for a feeling I've never had before. Sadness, nerves, excitement, and absolute dread until the 97th minute, when, as Max quite rightly stated, the shittest, most League Two goal ever trickles into the far corner. The release of emotion in the stadium at that moment wasn't just for promotion. It was for all those Bradford fans who had gone before, celebrating promotion 40 years ago, who never made it home. The Bradford Fire is sometimes referred to as the forgotten football disaster, observed quietly by our city and our friends in Lincoln, who tragically lost 2 of their own. Last weekend's scenes of joy were of a City United, players, fans and the wider community all celebrating what was a significant day in our wider history. It was dramatic, it was last minute, it almost slipped through our fingers. The most Bradford City way to do things. Thanks for all the content, especially on the wider football stories that don't always make the headlines. And Lucy, you have a link to this, obviously. Your husband, Neil Redfern, was playing for Lincoln that day, yeah?
Yeah, so he was there when they got promoted. He was working for local radio he was working to Talksport, I think, last week when Bradford got promoted in the 97th minute. But also, it's very strange because it's quite poignant in our house. However, there's a theme running through about the Bradford Fire is that they don't talk about it. Neil has told me, obviously I've known since I met him, that he played in it. But that's as far as the conversation goes. And he was the last player to kick a ball on that side as fans started to come on the pitch. And he was playing right back because Steve Collins had broke his leg, who then ended up in hospital seeing all the victims come in. They've made a couple of documentaries, and Neil was part of one of the documentaries, and he went off to film it. And he came home and he said, I cried when I was talking about it. And he said, and he felt quite embarrassed about it. And I think that is the thing about the Bradford Fire they call it the forgotten disaster, because Bradford, they commemorate it every single year. I went last year when Neil was working for Bradford City, and that's the only time they really talk about it, because it was that horrific for everybody involved. His family were in the stand, managed to sort of come out and help others get out, but the amount of the small amount of time it took, 4 minutes I think, for the whole stand to go up in flames. I think that the memories of that, I think, are just too horrific for everybody to talk about, and so you end up just talking about it yesterday or leading up to it. So it'd be interesting. I think it's an ITV documentary. There was one on last night on BBC that we watched in silence, and he was part of the ITV one that's coming on this week. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you know about, but we don't talk about it. But just yeah, sad, really sad.
Yeah. Just a couple of emails on non-league finals day to finish. Thomas says, "Hi Max, Barry and the gang. Any chance of a shout out to Aldershot Town, who won the FA Trophy 3-0 against Spennymoor Town on our first ever visit to Wembley in our 99-year history. I can't even begin to describe what this means to my family, the club and the town. We had nearly 20,000 fans at Wembley, which for a smallish non-league team is just amazing. I'm still in shock. I'm also a month away from having my second child, so we'll keep you updated on any vasectomy news. Cheers, Tom." Yeah, many congratulations. And I know I bollock on about it, Barry, but when it is your team on Wembley Way, I know it's one of my cliches, but it must have been amazing for those Aldershot fans.
Congratulations, Aldershot. Yeah. Whitstable won the FA Vase final yesterday. They beat Whiteleaf, I think 2-1 in extra time. But some friends...
What's a vase?
It's for, I think, 6th and 7th tier.
Yeah.
No.
I think it's what other people call vase.
Vase,
yeah.
It's
along
vase.
With, it's along with... It's I mean, maybe you don't buy yourself a lot of flowers, Barry. Someone buy Barry some flowers and then he'll need a vase to put them in. I mean, it's along with vehicle and Neymar. Yes, we had an email from Gary.
I'm speaking in my second language. So anyway, FA vase.
Yeah.
I still think vase. Well, there's nothing wrong with vase.
Well, it's just not what the word is, but do carry on.
Whitstable won 2-1 in added time. A friend of mine, he's from Whitstable. His parents travelled up for the game, and he said most of the town travelled up to Wembley, and the upshot was he was looking after about 25 different dogs yesterday in Whitstable because their owners had all gone to Wembley for this big day out.
Yeah, well done to them. Gary from Whitstable sent an email along those lines. Our local club is 140 years old this year. Today played its first ever game at Wembley. 10,000 fellow Seasiders, all without their dogs, celebrated our victory against the valiant Whiteleaf. We returned from Wembley to a jubilant Belmont, home of Whitstable Town, where fans took turns to hoist the trophy aloft. I've had a few, but it's up there as one of the best days of my life, attaching a picture of my dad and me in the clubhouse. Thanks for the good work. Yeah, well done. And I'm coming to Whitstable on a mini break in a couple of months. Maybe 4 months. Very excited. Lovely place to go. Anyway, that'll do for today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Lucy.
Cheers, Max.
Tomorrow's episode, by the way, is a mailbag. Please get your questions in to footballweekly@theguardian.com. You can send them on Instagram and Blue Sky as well. If you just search Football Weekly, you can send them to me on X, because I haven't left that hellscape quite yet. But that'll do for today. Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens. Back tomorrow.
This is The Guardian.